There was quite a few streamers and YouTubers who found my demo after I released it over Steam Next Fest. It was really fun to watch them play my game, and I ended up wasting a lot of time watching tons of videos instead of doing dev work.
Aber hey, ich bin unten angekommen.
Can I get back home? Got a long way to go. I'm a cat. Hear me meow.
But in a lot of ways, it's valuable to learn how people are playing the game and issues they're encountering and things which work and don't work. Clearly, the game was very hard for everyone.
Get on the thing! I'm gonna punch this game.
But after a few hours, most people were able to complete the demo. The main complaints I got back were that the controls were hard.
I can't turn very well, so I'm a little worried about that, but here we go. Run, jump. Ah!
Some people didn't like the cat ragdolling and dying.
Oh, I don't like the ragdolling kitty cat.
We can go down here, right?
And cats wouldn't die in real life from heights, which the cat dies in the game.
Oh no, the kitty's dead. He went down one level and busted his head.
The issue regarding the controls was a combination of things and was partly due to the game itself being very hard. The platforming and maneuvering is meant to be very difficult in certain sections, and as a result it will take a lot of skill to be able to maneuver through these sections. The other contributing factors to the difficulty in the demo were the inaccurateness of the turning when stationary.
Whack! I was trying to turn around!
And how long the cat would take to jump after the jump button was pressed.
Do I hit space to jump? Sure don't. Oh no. Oh gosh.
In the demo, when turning while stationary, the cat would rotate to 90% of the direction pressed before moving forward, and then turning the last 10% while moving. I decided I need to modify this, as there were a lot of sections where you need to do tight turns, and for a game which requires so much precision, having an imprecise turn was not acceptable.
No!
After around a week of tuning, I managed to get a result that was good. It did mean the turning was a little slower.
It's a bit of a slow-paced game. It's a slow burn.
But the increased precision was a necessary trade-off.
Really great.
The other issue was the jump, as there was a slight delay for the cat to get its feet into the right place before jumping.
You can hear my thumb hitting spacebar. Oh, developers, you gotta fix it.
While all games will have a delay, the delay in the demo was a lot more pronounced than most other games. As this was one of the most important features in the game, I really wanted to make it feel more responsive. When watching videos, a lot of players would often jump far too late and then die as a result.
Oh my god, no!
I had previously implemented a system whereby when players have 2 feet over the edge, they can no longer jump, and this was the reason for the majority of people dying, but a fair amount would still be due to the jump delay. At this point, the delay was around 0.11 seconds. After experimenting, I managed to reduce the delay to about 0.08 seconds, without too much of an unrealistic effect. Sometimes, if the cat's paws are in a faraway location, the blend to the jump animation can mean the paws don't fully touch the floor, but it's very hard to see, and it doesn't look too bad as it happens so quickly. It's a trade-off. Either the delay is longer and the animation looks more realistic, or it's faster and will look less realistic. The change I felt was noticeable though, and made the jumping feel a lot more responsive.
That's a 10.
The second main issue people mentioned with the demo was with the cat ragdolling and dying. I was aware that some people might be a bit sensitive to this, although I personally had no issue with it. It just seems funny to me.
Oh my god!
I decided I'd add an additional mode, which meant the cat disappeared rather than went into the ragdoll mode. I'd seen some cool death effects before, and I thought this would be a cool place to implement one of them.
The prophecy is true.
I decided to go with a disintegration effect for the cat mesh, and then have some petals spawn as the cat disintegrates. I used a light blue colour, as this is one of the main colours used in my game, throughout the menus and matches with the sky and skyline colour, which is constantly visible throughout the game. The end result I thought looked really good, and was a good alternative for players who didn't want to see the cat ragdoll when it dies.
Nice.
The other main issue some people had was with the cat dying from small heights.
I'm surprised that this cat can't just jump from here down to the platform below us.
I didn't really see it as a big problem, as it is a computer game and it's not intended to be all that realistic. In some ways I found it funny that the cat would die and ragdoll from such small distances. I thought it added to the silliness of the game. However, there was a fair few comments about this. And I did feel increasing the distance you died in some areas would make it more obvious which areas you could jump to, and so help guide the player a bit better. So I made some adjustments to the floor heights and some of the platforming areas, so the cat had to fall further before dying. I thought it was a good change, as not only did it make the game slightly more realistic, but it also felt a bit more dangerous as a result. I noticed after watching some people try to speedrun the game that they would jump constantly to get a speed advantage. I hadn't realised, but jumping was quicker than running. I thought it looked kind of stupid and was more fun to run in my opinion, and looked less goofy, so I went about making sure that running was quicker than jumping. While experimenting with this, I decided to increase the run speed slightly by around 5%, and I thought this was a good improvement. After a few more weeks, I revisited the speed again, and I thought I really wanted to give the cat an even greater sense of speed, as cats can run very fast, and I thought having a greater sense of speed is generally more fun in games. I played around with the settings fairly extensively, and I came to the conclusion that increasing the speed by an additional 15% worked well. I thought speed above this was probably too fast, and made the cat feel even more difficult to control. I was really happy with the increased speed, while also making the game a bit more fun, and giving the player a greater sense of speed. It also meant that players could travel through the levels even quicker, and would help reduce the time it takes to get further in the level for when players inevitably die and have to restart from the beginning. The increased speed was also good because the cat is even more difficult to control when running.
Look at me running. That's a risky move right there. Should not be running.
So I felt like it would potentially stop a lot of players from running constantly, as there was now certain areas which were even trickier when running.
Pretty good.
I decided I'd also edit the gravity in the game, as the cat's jump felt way too floaty in the demo. I want to strike a balance between giving enough control to the player and also making it seem somewhat realistic. Unfortunately, the more realistic the jump, the harder it would be to control, as the airtime would be reduced. I ended up increasing the gravity, but also increasing the velocity of the jump, so the airtime was greater. The jump ended up being a bit harder to control, as the cat moved more quickly, but it looked a fair bit better.
Alrighty then.
When moving the camera close to the cat in the demo, you'd also be able to clip inside the cat if you got the cat and the camera in the right position. And while this was kind of funny, it didn't really give a very good impression of the game. It didn't seem very polished. I decided that I'd get the cat to fade out when close. This looked more polished, and it meant when the player was in a small space that the player could see properly without the view being obstructed by the cat.
Nice.
In the demo, the camera had a lot of interpolation added to it to give it a smooth kind of gliding feel to the camera movement. And while I personally liked it, along with other issues, it made the game feel less responsive.
You have to understand, like, the controls work, but they're not quite as responsive as you might think a cat would be. Like, turning is very awkward!
And considering it was meant to be a precision platform game, I thought making it feel as responsive as possible was the way to go. I ended up removing all the interpolation, and as a result, the camera felt a lot more responsive. It took a bit of getting used to, but after a while it was clear that it was much better, especially for a game like this.
Good, kitty, good.
A lot of people in the demo would often try to look at the cat, and due to the way I set up the cat would not face the camera on default settings, as the cat would try to look in the direction the camera is facing. While you could change the mode to make the cat face the camera, it wasn't obvious for players.
Why is the cat looking back at me? It's weirding me out. Why is your head turned that way? What are you doing? I don't know what was happening there. That was weird.
I decided I'd create a new default mode to make the cat face the camera dynamically, as it was clear this was a feature a lot of players wanted. So when player is behind the cat will face the direction of the camera, and then when the player is in front of the cat would switch to face the camera. With the increased difficulty from the increased gravity on the jumps, it meant it was harder to land correctly on thinner beams.
There, like that. Use your neck to climb.
In the demo, I had the trace for each paw in the middle of each paw. I decided I'd change the trace to the inside of each paw, as this would make the game a bit easier and also make it more realistic. In the demo, I allowed the player free use of Slo Mo and Ragdoll functions, and while I did think they were good additions to the game, they were being abused in the game. People have figured out that if you triggered the Ragdoll at the right time while jumping, it would add extra velocity to your jump and make you jump further. And also if you repeatedly switch Ragdoll on and off using a tool assist, you could essentially fly, albeit very slowly. To combat these issues, I made sure there was a delay before you could turn off the Ragdoll after you turn it on, and that there was a delay before you could activate the Ragdoll when jumping. For the Slo Mo, people were leaving it on all the time to complete the game, and while I did want people to use it to help them complete the game, I did think having it on all the time made the game way too easy and wasn't really what I intended, which was just to have it on for short periods. To stop people overusing the Slo Mo, I made an ability which only lasts for 4 seconds, and you can only use it once, and then it only gets replenished when you pass a checkpoint or if you die.
Fair enough.
When turning with the camera in the game, while the cat was moving, the cat would also take a little time to follow the camera's rotation. I adjusted this so the cat would turn more quickly to follow the camera's direction, and I think this also helped, along with many other improvements, to give a greater feeling of responsiveness to the cat, and the cat felt a lot lighter and more agile as a result of all the changes. When the cat was jumping, particularly when jumping down from a large height, the cat would remain in the same position until it reaches close to the ground, where it would then start to play the landing animation. This I thought looked a bit stiff, and would be a good place to add physical animations to give a bit more character to the animation and make it seem a little more realistic. I went about adding physical animations to the back 2 legs and tail, as this is typically what the player will see when playing the game, especially when they're jumping. I thought the result was good and made the animations a bit more interesting and unique.
Pretty good.
The cat would often turn to spaghetti when in Ragdoll on lower-end systems, or when the CPU didn't have enough resource to properly compute the physics simulations in every frame. This was also evident with the physical animations when jumping, as the tail would often vibrate strangely or turn to spaghetti. I ended up changing the physics to use substepping, which meant the game would wait for the physics processing to complete before finishing a frame. The result was much more realistic physics, but it had a big downside that the game's frame rate would often slow down massively in certain areas where there was a large amount of collidable objects. After a lot of testing, I realised that while it worked well on my computer, the additional cost of substepping was quite substantial, and especially on lower end PCs, it could cause very low frame rates. Ultimately, I decided to switch substepping off. While it did produce more realistic physics, the impact on performance was too much, and unfortunately though, while the performance was better without substepping, it meant on lower end PCs that you would often have a spaghetti cat when you ragdoll. Once I'd finished with improving all the mechanics and fixing a lot of the bugs that were present in the demo, I moved on to by far the largest part of the development process, which was the level design and level creation process, and all the testing that went along with that. I ended up spending around 5 months or so building out the rest of the level. It took a lot longer than I anticipated, in part because I'm generally more interested in creating mechanics, and I knew it was such a large hurdle that it often meant I procrastinated quite a bit on building out the level. I slowly built up the level week by week, continually testing as I went to try and make some interesting and varied platforming challenges. I knew from the demo I wanted the cat to switch buildings at least once in the descent, in order to give a bit more variety to the surroundings. By the end of the level design process, I eventually decided on having 2 other buildings beside from the main construction tower the cat starts on. The first other building was another in construction tower, similar to the one the cat starts on, but this was a very bare bones building, with only the steel beam skeleton exposed where the cat can climb down. I thought this would be a cool open environment for the cat to platform in, and meant if you fell off, you'd almost always fall to the bottom, providing for more amusing deaths. The other building I thought I'd include was an office building, as I thought it'd be good to have an even more varied environment, and not just in construction skyscrapers. This new environment would help to provide a different change of pace to the gameplay, as I decided it'd be more of a maze environment, as offices often look very similar and can be confusing to navigate if you don't know your way around. I tried to mix up the gameplay a bit throughout the descent by adding a couple of time trial challenges and a few maze-like areas, as I thought constant platforming may become a bit boring after a while, especially when players are going to be repeating areas a lot. due to dying from the game's punishing difficulty. I did try to add multiple routes through the level as much as possible, as while the general gameplay is quite linear, there's typically 2 or more routes through a particular section. I wanted to add replayability to the game and help make it more interesting for speedrunners, as there were new routes to discover or certain routes that required a lot more skill.
Great.
Near the end of the level creation process, I thought it would be cool to include a deeper level of customization for the cat. In the demo, you had a very basic level of customization, where you could only switch the style of the cat, but players still really like this ability.
Switch kitty cats. Oh my god, you can choose all the different kinds of cats.
As a large section of players really enjoy customization, I thought it would be a good idea to have various unlockables throughout the level, some in plain sight, some in hidden areas, and some in hard to get places, to also add a different optional element to the gameplay. I wanted to have a separate menu for the cat customization, and also wanted the camera position to change so you could see the front of the cat while the menu is open, to make it easier to customize with. I made it so the camera transitions when the sub-menu is opened, and then when the player leaves, the camera moves back to the starting menu position. The first idea I had was to add hats, as I thought they'd be a funny addition, and would allow players to build a unique cat. I got a variety of different hats and played around with positioning them. While positioning them and adjusting the size, it was apparent there was multiple good variations of the size and position for a lot of the hats, so I decided to allow players to adjust the size and position of some of the clothing. After playing around with the hats, I thought it would be funny if they had glasses too, and I thought it would be cool if they could be added separately. I thought it'd also be good if they had collars and backpacks, so I decided to add 3 equipable areas, which were headgear, masks and glasses, and accessories. The system took a long time to build out, with all the intricacies of changing items and making them fit, and allowing players to customize the style and size of clothing. I thought the end result worked out really well, and was really fun to play around with all the different clothing available. I thought it'd also be really funny to add a chonkiness option to the cat, so players could pick whether they wanted a normal cat or a really fat cat, and everything in between. I started off the scale with no chonk, then to semi-chonk, then full chonk, then super chonk, then chonkus maximus, and then finally, oh lord, he coming. I thought it was a funny extra feature to the game and added to the silliness of the game. I also added a couple more features, such as changing eye colour and removing ears, so they could be hidden if players didn't want to show them for certain headgear. Initially, when I created the demo, my idea for the game was just to have one difficulty, where you only have 9 lives, as I liked the idea of all players having the same level of difficulty, and therefore the achievement of completing the game was the same for all players, similar to games like Elden Ring. Yes! However, I changed my mind after testing the game and building out the level, as the game was far too hard for only 9 lives, and also too long.
Oh, I didn't jump at the right time.
What the hell is even that?
I had thought about just adding one other difficulty mode where the player has 3 permanent checkpoints, which are points where when the player loses all 9 lives, they will restart from the latest permanent checkpoint with all 9 lives again. After testing this though, I realised that even this was too hard.
This is the hardest game of all time.
So I decided to add multiple difficulty modes.
There you go. Good kitty. Good kitty.
I added a save system for the clothing, so when an item of clothing was unlocked, it would always be unlocked, and set this up to work with Steam Cloud Save. I wasn't initially interested in adding any save points for the game. I personally thought that the game was so short anyway, that adding save points along the way would somewhat ruin the achievement of completing the game.
Woo! Yes!
However, after a lot of people provided feedback,
Really wishing there were save states!
and thinking on it some more, I added save points at each of the 3 chapters throughout the game. Another feature I really wanted to have was leaderboards. This game was built for speedrunners to a large degree, so I thought having an in-game leaderboard feature would be cool. After working on it for a while, I found out this was relatively easy to cheat with the Steam Leaderboard system. So I went about building a system to verify users' scores, and I also implemented a plugin which helped keep variables safe in memory to stop cheating with tools like Cheat Engine, which are able to edit in-memory variables. In the end, I got the leaderboards working and set up a separate submenu to show them, and then when they're entering the menu, the camera changes to show the full descent the player has to make while the menu is open.
Not bad!
While building out the demo, I had wanted to add an ability to hit physics-enabled objects so the cat could knock things around, but the system wasn't ready at that point, so it was disabled in the demo. After a fair bit of work, I managed to get the ability to hit objects to work in a fairly reliable manner, and it was fun to play around with, so I decided to include it in the full game. The physics in Unreal Engine are still a bit janky from time to time, but for the most part it works pretty well, and it's fun to play around with.
Wonderful.
I got to the point where the game was pretty much built. I just needed to fix some remaining bugs and test the performance more thoroughly. When testing the performance, while it wasn't too bad, it wasn't quite at the level I wanted. One big thing which I fixed which helped with the performance a lot was turning off the physics substepping, which I mentioned earlier. The other big issues were down to having so many meshes in the level and using dynamic lighting with those meshes, and then also the chaos vehicle system I was using. Despite using instant static meshes, I was still having issues with performance due to the amount of meshes I had. I had over 20,000 meshes in my level, so this was having a big impact on performance. After spending many weeks on optimization of the meshes, including optimizing textures, shaders and LODs, I decided after a lot of testing to split out the level into multiple sub-levels, which would be made visible and hidden as and when they're needed. This had a slight performance impact when making the sub-levels visible, but performance as a whole was much better than when everything was in one level.
Makes sense.
Also, due to the sheer volume of objects in the level and the sheer size of my environment, the cost of dynamic lighting was very large. After many weeks of playing around with the lighting, I eventually decided that it was worth switching to stationary lighting, which use a mix of static and dynamic lighting. This unfortunately meant that I couldn't add any changing weather or day-night cycles within the same level, but it meant the game's performance was a lot better and more people would have a better experience with the game as a result.
Cool.
The other issue was related to the performance of the traffic. While the performance impact wasn't huge, particularly on lower end systems, it was still significant. After weeks making a lot of changes, I managed to significantly reduce the overhead of the system. The main performance savings were reducing the complexity of the skeletal mesh's skeleton and removing the animations being performed, and also switching the stack meshes being used for the cars.
Nice.
After the game was close to a finished state, I began to start the beta testing with a few different testers. The main feedback I got was the game was still very hard, but the control, responsiveness, and accuracy of the cat was much improved from the demo. There was a fair few bugs found, which I fixed, which was good. People also wanted me to add in an easier mode where there was unlimited lives. I wasn't initially keen on the idea, but I eventually realised a lot of people were having difficulty progressing through the game,
Why make it that way? Why would you make it that way?
so I thought it was necessary and added a casual difficulty. I released the game on the 1st of April, and we'll go over the release and my marketing in another video or two. I did make some updates after the release, such as fixing tons of bugs and adding even more save points, so now there's a total of 5. Some people did want save points at every checkpoint, but I really don't want to add a save point for every checkpoint, as I feel like it would cheapen the achievement of completing the game,
Too easy.
which is not how this game is meant to be, as it's meant to be an extremely difficult rage game.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
I will continue to think about it though, and might potentially change my mind about it in the future, but I'm not sure. I also added in the ability to customize the cat during gameplay, as players often wanted to change their clothing to the clothing they just unlocked, and previously players would have to lose their progress and go back to the main menu to do that. I also reduced the delay on the jump even further, down from roughly 0.08 seconds to 0.05 seconds. It again made the animation blending a little worse, but it helped improve the responsiveness further. I also increased the amount of traces on each paw, from 1 trace to 3 traces per paw, to make the system a bit more accurate and make it a bit fairer in certain circumstances. Only Way is Down is on Steam, and the link's in the description. Go check it out if you're interested.